Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about the high power wall connector versus the NEMA 1450, so that conversation is coming up. So I'm going to cut right to the chase and say that, in my opinion, the NEMA 1450 is the better option, but I'm going to explain obviously why. If we look straight at pricing, the mobile connector for the NEMA 1450 is $275 for the kit basically, and the high power wall connector is $420. And the two big main differences are speed and mobility. So if we were to take the Model Y for an example, if you were to charge on the mobile connector on a NEMA 1450 at 32 amps, you're going to get about 27 miles an hour. And if you do the same thing on the wall connector, it's going to be about 40 miles at 48 amps. So while the mobile connector does charge slower, it's basically an irrelevant point because if you're charging overnight, it really doesn't matter. Sure, it takes longer, but you're sleeping anyways, so who cares? There's also the mobility factor. So if you like traveling, say you stay in Airbnbs or whatever and you take your car, you can actually on that site, and I'm sure other sites, filter by level 2 charging, and whatever houses you pick or rentals you pick, you can find ones that have NEMA 1450s, bring your mobile connector with you, and you can charge there at your destination rather than having to find DC fast chargers or superchargers on the way. And also, even as a last resort, most houses and garages have 120 volt outlets in them, so you could do that and charge at least a little bit with the mobile connector rather than zero if you were, charging, if you had to charge DC fast charging. So if you're going to have the wall connector, you obviously can't do that because the wall connector is mounted to your garage, so you're going to have to DC fast charge to be able to charge rather than having the mobile connector and being able to charge at your destination. So in my opinion, there's a couple scenarios where the wall connector makes more sense over the NEMA 1450. First one is cool factor. So if you have a Tesla themed garage or you just really like the way the wall connector looks over the NEMA 1450 plug, then yeah, eat the cost and go ahead and get the wall connector and you're done basically. If for whatever reason in your situation you have to put the EVSE, the electrical vehicle supply equipment, the wall connector outside, so you have to mount it on the outside of your garage or something, it's probably a little bit safer to get the wall connector over the NEMA 1450. You can make the NEMA 1450 outlet waterproof in a case, but it's a little bit better to do the wall connector in this case. If you have a really limited time of use rate, say you have like a maybe 3-hour window overnight where it's like super off peak and the cheapest rate, then in this case it wouldn't make sense to get the wall connector because if you can charge at full power at 48 amps, you're going to be able to get, jam more energy into your car in that short period of time for a cheaper rate rather than, spreading it out with the NEMA 1450. Or if you have two EVs or two Teslas in general, if you put in two wall connectors, you can actually power share them. If you put them on the same circuit, they'll talk to each other. You can set that up. And so maybe that makes sense for you if you have more than one EV. While that option is cool, I think it's a little bit silly. So case in point, we have two EVs. We have a Rivian and a Tesla. And so if you know anything about Rivian, their batteries are huge. The Rivian has a 135 kilowatt hour battery pack. And so what we do here is we just use the NEMA 1450. That's it. So basically I work from home and basically I charge during the day and my wife has a regular job where she has to go into the office. And so basically I just charge her car overnight and there's no problems. It's basically like we have our own charger even though we're sharing one. I think the only time it really makes sense to have two wall connectors or just two EVSEs in general is if, say, you both have a long commute and so you both are forced to charge overnight. Then maybe it makes sense to have two where you don't have to share because both cars need a lot of energy every day. But even if that's the case, you could still put in two NEMA 1450s and still be fine. Maybe if you wanted to be super safe, you could just, put the power down to maybe 24 amps instead of 32 amps if your panel can't handle it, and you could charge that way, and then you would still be good, for the next day. There's also cost to install. So basically around here in my area, a NEMA 1450 right next to your panel is going to cost you about $500. And the wall connector is going to cost you $700 in my area because electricians just charge you the Tesla tax because they can. And you can't hide it because you got to tell them, hey, I'm putting in a wall connector. So they're going to know that you're a rich Tesla owner. as opposed to a NEMA 1450 where basically you can have any EV, you can have a Bolt or a Leaf or something, and they're not going to charge you that tax because you're not rich like if you have a Tesla. And for those of you that are arguing about the GFCI issue with a NEMA 1450, well, the extra install cost of the wall connector is going to, negate that anyways. So if you're in a NEMA NEC 2020 state, you do have to have a GFCI. So you'd have to pay a little bit more for a GFCI breaker, but you may just be able to save that money if you're still in an NEC 2017 state where it's not required. Also keep in mind that if you're going to put in the wall connector and you want that max power, you're going to need to put it on a 60 amp breaker. And so you've got to make sure that your house has, a 200 amp panel or has enough amperage to begin with to be able to support that. So if you have a spa or something or like a really big heat pump or something, you may not even be able to put in the 60 amp breaker, which basically defeats the purpose of putting in a wall connector because now you can't even use the max power. And then at that point, it makes more sense to probably just get a NEMA 1450 because you're going to be charging at the same speed anyway. Another note is that the NEMA 1450 is more versatile. So the NEMA 1450 is kind of the de facto EV charging plug. And so if you were to get another car that's not a Tesla, like a Rivian, wink wink, the Rivian comes standard with a NEMA 1450 mobile connector. So basically, when we got the car, I could have just plugged it right into the NEMA 1450 and started charging the Rivian with zero hassle. With the wall connector in this scenario, you're going to have to spend more money either way. You're either going to have to get a universal wall connector, or probably the most cost-effective solution would be to get a NACS adapter to J1772, but it's still going to cost you more money to do that. And so if you have the NEMA 1450, you don't have to spend any money at all. Another versatility point of the NEMA 1450 is if you're into like welding or you have other 240 volt tools, you could use the NEMA 1450 to plug those in and power those tools. So a welder tool is a pretty common one where basically you could use the NEMA 1450 and power the welder that way. So I think on one front, this is really an educational thing. So I think a lot of people that buy Teslas don't even realize you can use a mobile connector and a NEMA 1450 to charge a car. They just automatically go to the wall connector because, big surprise, Tesla's first charging option is the wall connector. I do also realize that this past year in 2024, pretty much every car company that has EVs announced that they're going to go to the NACS charge port. And so that's great. But there's still going to be a lot of old cars out there that still have J1772. And so basically, it still makes sense to have a NEMA 1450 because those cars are still going to be around, or say maybe one of your friends has one, then you can still charge those cars that way without having to spend more money. So I think in the end, either option is fine, but if you really want to maximize your money, the NEMA 1450 is the way to go. So if you are considering buying a Tesla, are you leaning towards a mobile connector with the NEMA 1450? Or are you leaning towards the wall connector? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.